How have you seen a person's life be ruined in a single day? Watched a kid get an underage alcohol violation. Wouldn't normally be a life ruiner, but he and I were both college students at a university that had been on the news a lot for the drinking party culture. The culture has been the same since the 70s, but they didn't like the bad press, so they cracked down. Like 2 months before this happened, they instituted a new policy. It used to be that you would deal with the legal implications, then they would make you go to an alcohol education program, and you wouldn't be able to study abroad. Now, they suspend you for the rest of the semester, make you move out if you live on campus, and they cancel any financial aid the school is providing. I didn't know him well, but I do know that he, like me, had student loans on top of a generous financial aid package, and because of the aid program we were in, it's unlikely he could afford to come back without the financial aid package from the school. Man came in to rob the bar I was drinking in. Bartender told him to get fricked. Man shot him twice in the crotch and walked out. Hopefully he missed anything too important. We were standing on a downtown corner watching 4th of July parade when we saw the parents of one of the players on a soccer team I coached talk to someone and began running like heck through the crowd with panic-stricken faces. Someone came to our door later and told us the Matt, their 10-year-old son, had jumped off a float to get some candy thrown by someone on another float and had tripped. The float he was on ran over his head, killing him. Our son was on the same float and hadn't gotten home yet. One of the most depressing moments in my life. The parents were never the same. The people on floats in our town never threw candy again. I think of Matt every 4th of July. A similar thing happened in my town probably 15 years ago. Ever since they banned throwing candy. I know a man whose car was sandwiched between two semis, killing his wife and all 3 of their children instantly. Somehow he walked away with only a broken arm, but I'm pretty sure he wishes he hadn't. I used to work the front desk of HR for a big hospital. There was a cute elderly gentleman who had been hired for the janitorial staff. I onboarded him and remembered how sweet, kind, and appreciative he was all the time. One day, a few months into his job, he came to the front desk and looked completely different. His light spirit was gone and had been replaced by something much darker. He had come in to set up counseling appointments and proceeded to tell me why. He was on the job when he received a call that a patient had fallen and he needed to go to X spot to help clean it up. That was it. Of course, he didn't realize until he arrived at the scene that the patient had jumped to her death from the top of a 5-story garage building. He was the first person there, totally unprepared for the gruesome scene. No one had warned him of what he would find. No one thought that the poor janitor could have been spared from seeing that. My heart still goes out to him. This was 8 years ago. I hope he got lots of counseling and was somehow able to move on with his life. He didn't have to say much for me to understand how deeply traumatized he was. Poor soul. My friend's husband produced and consumed child pee, including some photos of their children and nephews. She found out when DHS raided their apartment. It tore her life apart. She's doing well now, though, divorced, obviously, and he no longer has any parental rights. She's still struggling to help her kids process the whole thing. My neighbor knocked on the front door early one morning. We'd never met. He introduced himself and wanted me to know why there might be a lot of cars parked in front of the house. All 3 of his children had died in a car accident the night before. I've been reading these comments for a couple of hours now. This is the one that hit me in the gut. This man has lost everything and still being considerate of his neighbors. A guy that I worked with asked to have Friday night off as he was going out of town. Turns out he went to go meet with an underage girl he met on Craigslist. That ended up actually being a giant police sting. He was arrested for soliciting a minor. That was probably 6 years ago and the last I heard he was still locked up. When I was in EMT school we were told about a paramedic student. Instructor was a paramedic as well, who observed a stabbing call. They arrive at the bar and see a dude with a knife in his abdomen. Medic student takes lead and pulls the knife out. Something you never do, as I'm sure you know. Senior medic loses his freaking mind at this dumbass, asking him what the frick he was thinking. Student freaks out and, you guessed it, puts the fricking knife back in. The patient died as a result. Student lost any chance of having a good job, not even just in EMS, and was charged with the death of the patient. Might have been manslaughter, I don't remember. His entire life was ruined because he freaked out and made a mistake on a call. Not a rookie mistake or a common slip up, but in about half a minute he ruined his life. Holy crap. Also the fact the series of events was 1. Man stabbed 2. Thank God EMS is here 3. Man stabbed again. My family. I woke up to the most horrifying screams. Never heard screams like that before, not even in the worst horror films. It was my mother after being told dad had crashed his bike on the way back to base. I still have nightmares about them, and still break down about my father. It's been 15 years, but the man was my best friend and a great dad. A girl in my class got caught with a thermos full of vodka, and when the teacher caught her, she got sent to the principal's office. Well, when the principal asked her why she was drinking, the girl told him that she had been sleeping with the school resource officer. Dude was a cop stationed at the school making love to a 10th grader. Got dragged out of the school by officers that worked alongside him. At the court hearing they found out he was having physical relationship to more girls at the school. His wife and 2 kids were in the courtroom to support him because he told them he was innocent. That kinda caved when one of the girls had a video of the 2 of them making love. Our former SRO is now dating a former student who is the same age as me. We graduated in 2015. He left his wife and kids for her. We all shuddered when we remembered how often she was in his office during the school day, having lunch, hanging out, whatever. When I was like 9 or something, a boy from my class was killed by his mother before she committed suicide. I saw it on the news at night, only to learn it was him the next morning. We all got sat down in like 4th grade, that's about age 9-10 here, and told to be extra nice to one boy who was returning to school after being gone. I later found out that his dad had killed his mother and himself in front of the boy. I have no idea how you come back from that, even if the other kids are nice for a few days, but kudos to our school for trying, I guess. Watched a mom and her kid on a boat escorted by law enforcement back to the dock. Her boyfriend had gone swimming off the boat. The wind pushed the vessel away from him. She didn't know anything about how to turn it on to move it closer. It kept getting farther. He kept swimming harder. He eventually slipped under and was recovered 80 feet down a few days later. I'll never forget the look on her face. Never. He was a 28-year-old airman. Peak health. Wear a life jacket. People, you are not stronger than Mother Nature, and don't leave a boat without someone who can drive it safely. When I was a kid, I lived in an apartment complex. One of the families had 3 young kids. One day the parents needed to run some errands, so they hired a babysitter to watch the kids. The babysitter fell asleep, and one of the kids started playing with some matches. The parents came home to huge billowing clouds of smoke and fire coming from all the windows. All 3 kids and the babysitter died. They were only gone for about an hour. Mine. When a non-curable rare progressive brain disease was diagnosed. I am now 51 years old, in the final phase of my life, and my 52nd birthday will probably be my last. Doing an MRI on a 33-year-old healthy man, because he was a bit dizzy, and finding a golf ball tumor in his brain. Read the radiology report. Google type of tumor, finding only 5% survive. My dad used to work at Prudential Financial, and he told me that in the days after Enron's stock suddenly dropped to nothing, some of his co-workers just walked around like zombies. Apparently they'd put a ton of money into Enron, and were now completely screwed. That's nuts. Both of my parents worked at Pru. Both lost their jobs when I was in elementary school. I never asked what happened, but it was understood the company had to make major cutbacks. Looking back, it was definitely a difficult time for my mom, dad and us 3 young kids, but they never let on to that fact. Frick, they are great parents. Have a friend whose boss got into a gnarly car accident a week ago. Today she was officially told she's paralyzed from the waist down. She was also notified today that her husband died, non-car accident related. I don't know exactly why he passed, but to go from a happy life with your soulmate to not being able to walk and have your life partner is something I can't imagine recovering soon from. That's literally the stuff of my nightmares. I work as a registered nurse in a hospital in Kentucky. A patient came in through the erasing heck and yelling things like I want to donate my organs. This place sucks, frick all of you, etc. etc. He stomped out the front entrance and a CNA, nurse's assistant, followed him out to attempt at calming him down. He brandished a .45 and blew his brains out in front of the young assistant. He died. Organs couldn't be harvested, and she is in therapy. Like 7ish years ago, a bunch of the crew chiefs at my guard base were out celebrating one of their own who got his associate's degree. They were all drinking, not a ton, and eventually went home, except for one guy. He stayed and drank until last call. He decided to drive home. He hit a 20-year-old who was on his way to work at about 2 AM and turned him into a paraplegic. Our wing commander basically told him, plead guilty to the county and go to jail with an administrative discharge. His family would have been able to keep some of his benefits, like the VA loan and GI Bill, or fight it, lose, cost his family tons of money, and get a dishonorable. Dishonorable basically is like you never even served. He plead guilty. I was part of a notification team that told a mother that her 20-year-old son had died. Watching her collapse, I know that her life would never be the same after that. When I was about 13, I was talking with my best friend at a playground on a hill. Suddenly this lady comes racing down on her bike. She's not wearing a helmet, which was unfortunate because her bike slipped from underneath her and she goes flying. Smacks her head into a corner. I was too young to know this at the time, but I'm almost certain she died instantly. Wear a helmet. I'm sober 6 years. There was a guy who used to attend meetings in my circle who picked up a drink on a Friday after being sober for more than 2 decades. They found him in the bay on Monday morning. Just been diagnosed with a possible liver disease at 27. Any tips for someone who needs to quit immediately? Co-worker got caught stealing and got fired. He went home and told his wife, and apparently she had enough and left him and took the kids. Police found him the next morning in the woods deceased. I saw a man's life just crumble in less than 24 hours. This was back in junior high school. Dude sent his nudes to an 8-year-old, him being 12, and the school found out. The cops were involved and they pulled up to the school and he left in handcuffs. It also turned out that same 8-year-old that he sent nudes to, he beat her into a coma. Don't know what happened to him. Obviously he had some sort of assault and child pornography charges, but that's all I know. 3 weeks after graduating from high school, a student got drunk at a party and put a knife in another guy's chest. Didn't kill him, but it was a close call. Goodbye adulthood. Yep. At least several times a month we had to take care of a family who learned that their child had cancer that day. Pretty terrible, life-altering news. I spent a lot of time distracting kids with board games, coloring while their parents were talking to doctors, crying, and then amazingly pulling it together to continue on. My parents talked about this day for me. I was diagnosed with leukemia when I was between 3-4 years old. It was a misdiagnosis, but they said they thought it was a death sentence and it was horrible. I grew up best friends with my sister and one day she didn't come home from work. I was 16 at the time. She was 22. I heard my parents start to rumble around the house turning the lights on and I could hear more commotion and panic. The cops had called our house cause they found my sister's car damaged on a street in the middle of a neighborhood with the driver's side door still open and they found one of her shoes was in the middle of the street. The next morning, still no sister. She worked as a bartender. She left work that night and some guy followed her, sideswiped her car and when she got out to swap insurance he kidnapped her and put her in his truck and drove off and that night continued to violate and abuse her and held her captive through the night and into the next day. My sister managed to escape that next day and run to the nearest house, banging on the doors. The homeowners let my sister in and called 911. They could tell she had been beaten and attacked. She was taken to the hospital, which is when we got the phone call where she was. She had 2 broken ribs. Her face was nearly black and blue, both black eyes, and scratches all over her body. After that I've never had my sister back. She survived the attack but she suffers horrible anxiety and panic attacks. She can't go out in public alone. She drinks heavily and is terrified to move out of my mom's and live alone. IDK. I just used to look up to her and we would laugh and watch movies and bounce on the trampoline and she would drive me to try local food chains and we would listen to music, and ever since I've never had my big sister back. I'll always love her, but it breaks my heart. In one day her life changed for the worst. This is so sad. I'm sorry that happened. 2 people. My dad when my mom confessed she had been cheating on him, and my mom when the police showed up and informed her my dad had been found dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. That's some life-altering stuff there. I'm so incredibly sorry you had to deal with this in your life. I hope you're doing reasonably well. A really nice man who owned a gaming cafe here, a place with many computers connected on LAN where people go to play games together. Age 33. Has a wife and 2 kids. I know him. I used to frequent his place a lot, and one early morning I was going to his place to just play and stuff. The place was not open that morning, and his business partner was walking around asking where his partner was. I told him that I hadn't seen him that day. Turns out that his house was hit by a freaking missile. I live in Syria, so this is more common to me than most other people on this earth, but dang. His home was burned and he and his children were killed. Worst part? His wife, a college professor from what I was told, went to work that day before the missile hit. She was in the university when she lost her husband, her children and her home. Everything she had gone in just one lovely Mediterranean morning. I don't know much about her. I just hope she's alright these days. Dang. As soon as I saw Gaming Cafe, I was bracing for something along the lines of him being busted for child pee. But, holy crap, I couldn't even imagine it being so much worse. A friend of mine got busted in a drug raid and was caught with half a minivan's worth of herb. Most people measure their herb in grams, some in ounces, a few in pounds. Then there's this dude measuring his in minivans. A friend of mine decided to travel by car with his wife and 2 kids. In a few hours they were hit by a truck. He was the only one to survive. Every time I meet him I see all the pain in his eyes and have no idea how to help him. Not me, but a friend who is an IQ nurse. A burn victim came in. I'll spare the details because they are freaking grisly in so many ways. Turns out there had been a fire at their house. They got out fine, realized their kid was inside, raced in and got the kid out, sustaining massive injuries that required them to have a coma induced. The day they were woken up, they had to be told that their child had died anyway. My front neighbor, 19/20F, committed suicide one morning. We found out when we saw the police and ambulance arrive in front of our houses. I was watching by the window because I was kind of curious and I was feeling so sad I just couldn't stop watching. When the mother arrived, I saw her fall on her knees and break down crying when the officers told her daughter was dead. It was truly heartbreaking. I don't think I'll ever forget the face she made. She was destroyed. It was so incredibly sad. It's almost been 4 years. I can't imagine how much pain that mother has been through. We had extended family together for a holiday and everyone was making jokes about how my cousin was late. His mom and dad were involved in the jokes, texting him being upset about how he was late and all. Turns out, someone hit him in a head-on collision on his way over and he died on impact. The police knocked on the door to notify the family like a freaking movie. I'll never forget watching the family crumple to the ground. I knew a guy who, within the same 24 hours, learned that his wife of 7 years was pregnant with someone else's child. His wife was filing for divorce, and she was going to try to get their house to herself because she was the primary signer on their mortgage because his credit wasn't so hot. That was brutal to see. Frickin' A. Dang. I hope that dude is doing okay now. An 18-year-old tried to steal a couple bottles of Hennessy from my store. When I confronted him, he swung the bottle at my head and connected. I rolled with the blow so it didn't do much damage. Charged with assault and robbery by my company, violent crimes offender, and lost custody of his baby. I was working in a bank. One day the director fired one of his executives. The whole "empty your desk, you're fired" speech in front of everyone. The director was furious and the guy seemed entirely destroyed. Then he explains to all that this guy gave his login and password to a friend in another branch. The friend used that login and others while doing some kind of credit card fraud. Police arrested her but lacked evidence against the fired guy, so they just fired him on the spot. Obviously, besides losing his job, he was also blacklisted to work in banks or finance. A kid I went to school with and his sister died in a car crash. They were in the car behind the parents' car driving the older sister to her first year of college. Parents made a turn and no longer saw the kid's car behind them. I would say finding both your kids dead is up there. As a marriage counselor, I often see one confession from a partner absolutely ruin their partner's life, future self-esteem. It's heartbreaking. You have been visited by the happy baby pygmy murder cow. Back away slowly and subscribe quickly to ensure your safety. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.